and welcome to TPA Talks. I'm Danielle Boxall, and today I'm joined by Leo Kearse. He's a Scottish right-wing comedian, and he's famous for his appearances at Comedy Unleashed, as well as his viral video about Extinction Rebellion. Leo, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You've been stuck in Australia for lockdown, but you're in the UK now. How long have you been back in the UK?
So I've been back. I came back in June, so I was in Australia from January through to June. But to be honest, it was amazing. I was in West Australia, so they didn't have any coronavirus there. So I was going to the beach. I was, having barbecues. It was brilliant fun. It was sunshine, running on the beach every day. It didn't feel like lockdown at all.
But you're happy to be back in the UK?
No, I wish I'd stayed, to be honest. I thought the coronavirus would be done by now. You know what I mean? But now they're still pretending it's a problem. Like, nobody's dying. There was like 2 deaths the other day, and they're like, I've got to lock down the whole country. And they're doing it like, so I did a show yesterday at Top Secret Comedy Club, best comedy club in the world. And they announced the new regulations the night before. So people cancelled, even though the regulations didn't affect it. There's so much uncertainty. It's really difficult for promoters and club owners at the moment to put on comedy nights, because you've got to hire staff, you've got to buy stock, you've got to tell the comedians they've got a show. And then the government turns around and says, tomorrow we're changing the rules. So I don't know. I think it's time for the government to step back and stop, just leave it to go through the healthy population. And I think we'll be fine.
So you're not happy with the way the government's handled it then?
No, not at all. Not at all. They're like, they've shut down the economy and they're spending loads of money. I feel like I voted for Boris and got Corbyn anyway. I didn't actually vote for Boris. I voted Lib Dem, but because I don't believe in Brexit. But I think Brexit's another waste of taxpayers' money. But I really feel like they're the most sort of financially left-wing government, left-wing conservative government we've had in ages. They're obviously borrowing loads to pay for all of this. And from my point of view, as somebody who works, literally in the gig economy, I've had thousands of pounds of work just evaporate, and it's so many false starts with it coming back. I think the government should just butt out of it, and I think people, there should be civil disobedience against the lockdown. I don't think I understand we've got to protect the weak and the vulnerable and old people, but everyone else, we can make our own decisions.
So you mentioned a little bit about working in the gig economy, and you are a self-described right-wing comedian.
Yeah.
So I suppose I just want to talk a bit about what it's like being a right-wing comedian. Do you get a lot of flack from other comedians when you're out on the road?
Not so much from other comedians. I mean, the weird thing about being a right-wing comedian is people who've never met you make up their minds that you're evil and racist and all the rest of it. So I get people on Twitter accusing me of racism. It happened this week, in fact. It was a representative of the Live Comedy Association, ironically their diversity and inclusion rep, who accused me of being racist. Ironic because she's making an assumption that any right-wing person is racist, and it's not the 1970s. The Tory government's got the most ethnically diverse cabinet in history. So there's a lot of progress being made, and I don't consider myself racist. My girlfriend's mixed race. It's I don't feel racist. So there's a lot of sort of accusations that get leveled at you, and a lot of assumptions, a lot of prejudice that people make about you. But most of the bookers have got a sense of humor. They understand it's like a fun thing, Like, if they watch my comedy, it's a fun thing. I'm not, if I was coming out and saying, neo-Nazi rhetoric, nobody would laugh. That's not funny. It would be a horrible thing. So I'm obviously doing it, I'm doing it for a laugh. And I think a comedian's job is to poke at the orthodoxy. And at the moment, certainly on social media and the sort of liberal discourse, in public, the speech that people put out in public, it's all very left-wing. It's all very socialist. It's all virtue signaling. I think people are a bit more right-wing when they get into the privacy of the polling booth.
But then I suppose, you say it's the orthodoxy of comedians. It's the job of comedians to challenge the orthodoxy, but the government is a right-wing government. So I suppose you could say that it's natural that they'd want to poke fun and punch up at the government and at right-wing views.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's that right wing a government, to be honest. They seem to be spending money like a drunken socialist. But yeah, I mean, I understand that obviously we've got a right wing government here and in America, but we should mock them. But what about mocking the other? What about mocking the other way? I mean, I think comedy should explore every option. I do stuff about how Donald Trump's a great guy, and I do stuff about defending Thatcher's closure of the coal mines, and it kills. Like I do it in Glasgow, where obviously the Tories aren't very popular. And people laugh. People love it. I won Scottish Comedian of the Year doing that stuff about why the coal mines should have been shut down. And if it's funny, I think people don't need to agree. I mean, there's this idea at the moment that comedians have to be some sort of arbiters of absolute moral purity and truth. And we're not. We're supposed to be the idiots up the back of class making fun of everything. So I think if people can see that, you're coming from your own personal logic and it's your own personal truth, they can get on board with it, even if they don't actually share that view.
Yeah, so you mentioned that in Glasgow they loved your comedy. Do you get a lot of flack from audiences in Bristol or Shoreditch or like some of those more sort of trendy hipstery places?
Yeah, I mean sometimes audiences can be a bit sticky, can be a bit anxious when if you bring up certain topics, they just automatically. But I think that goes for any comedian. People are just a bit more sensitive now. But I think that's why it's almost a selling point for me because I step outside that and I'm going way over the boundaries of what other comedians might do. So yeah, people enjoy that.
So I suppose we have heard of you. We've heard of Jeff Norcott, who you've got some work with, and we've heard of
today.
Simon Evans.
Yeah.
But we haven't really heard of any other right-wing comedians. Why do you think that is?
To be honest, an important thing in comedy is being likable. Sorry, can you hear that? I'm actually under a train. I'm at Vauxhall Comedy Club, so there's like trains going right over our head. But an important thing about comedy is being likable. So if you can pretend to be a socialist, pretend to want to share the wealth, then you can look like a good person. Also, a lot of comedians aren't rich. Being a socialist makes sense for them because you take money off richer people and give it to them. But in reality, all comedians are self-starting Thatcherite entrepreneurs going out and hustling for work in a free market. And the pay structure in comedy is really unequal. Like the headliner will get £500, like the open spots get nothing. I've never seen one of these virtuous left-wing headliners demanding that his pay is equally distributed amongst all the acts. They talk socialism, they don't live it. And I bet none of them pay all their tax because you get paid a lot of cash that goes under the mattress. Like I bet none of these people. Socialists don't seem to understand. You can actually give the government. If you think taxes should be higher, you can give the government more money. Nobody's stopping you. The government's not going to be like, no, don't give us more money. They'll accept that money. None of them do, though. It's always higher taxes for other people.
Do you think there's other sort of right-wing comedians out there, but we just haven't heard of them? Do you think they exist? Are they on the circuit at all?
I think a lot of people are, like shy Tories, if you know what I mean. Mm. So, and I know, I post stuff on social media and it gets a bit of a reaction, but I get quite a lot of people messaging me privately being like, I love that bit of material or I love that video, but I can't, I don't want to say it out loud. I don't want people to see me supporting you. So I think there's a lot more right-wing comedians out there than you might imagine. And I think with Tim Davies coming out and saying like the BBC's got a left-wing bias and it needs to be addressed, I think you'll see a lot of people suddenly, when they see that dollar, that money being dangled in front of them, they'll suddenly discover they're a bit more right-wing than they used to think they were.
So I suppose before all this happened, it would have been quite tempting for like you to sort of adopt left-wing views just so it would be easier to get gigs on the BBC or, get more plaudits at Edinburgh Fringe and things like that.
Yeah, it would have been. But I mean, I think you've got to stick to your ideals and your integrity. Like, I don't think comedians should be bootlicks going along with whatever fashion just to get gigs and get on the BBC.
Yeah, you mentioned there that the BBC are trying to get more right-wing people on. Yeah. Do you think that's just lip service, or do you think they're actually committed to changing the sort of bias against right-wing views?
I mean, I think they really have to. I mean, there's a big push for diversity, representation, inclusion, and that's great. That's absolutely great. But we've got to recognise that the country we've got a right-wing government. We're in a democracy. Half the country voted for them. We're not living in, in some left-wing country. So we've got to have them represented as well. And especially if it's funny. The thing with BBC comedy is I just find it so tame. I've done stuff for the BBC, and I know there's lots of compliance and all the rest of it that you've got to go through. So sometimes a lot of the funny stuff gets filtered out, which doesn't happen as much on YouTube. But so much, you turn on the MASH report, and apart from Jeff, who's hilarious on it, a lot of the comedy is just people going, oh, Boris Johnson's got silly hair and he's an idiot. Donald Trump's got silly hair and he's an idiot. It's like, wow, I'm really learning here. What amazing depth and insight I'm getting here. This revolutionary comedy. So I think they need to get some fresh voices on.
Yeah, you mentioned like they've got Jeff Norcott on the MASH report, but a lot of people have criticised the BBC of right-washing, which is where they sort of have one right-wing view, so they can say, oh, well, we do have diversity of opinion because we've got Jeff Norcott on the MASH report. Therefore, we have, everybody, all opinions are represented. Yeah. Do you think it's just going to lead to more of that with this sort of like new approach of trying to appear more diverse?
Yeah, I mean, the BBC really is, it's been infiltrated and taken over with wokeness, with, this sort of liberal dogma, which is, it's like a religion, and it's puritanical, and I think they'll try and keep right-wing people out as much as they can. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit of right-washing, and but at the end of the day, just market forces are going to force the BBC to represent right-wing voices. The BBC is losing audience share hugely. Like Live at the Apollo, the viewing figures for that are down 96% from its peak. That's a huge. I mean, that's a complete failure. And it's because they're not putting the funniest people on. They're picking people, ticking boxes and stuff. They're not always picking the funniest people. I mean, there's a lot of funny people on there. If any of my mates who've been on it are watching, I wasn't talking about you, but like just everybody's watching stuff on YouTube now. I'm putting videos on YouTube. Every time I put a video on YouTube, people send me money and I get more followers. So I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to try and get in the BBC anymore. And when I did do stuff for the BBC, it got so watered down because there's so much compliance to go through. It sort of killed a lot of the comedy that was in it. So yeah, I think YouTube is the way forward. It's a complete meritocracy, and you're in control of your own destiny and your own income on YouTube. Although that said, I do get videos demonetized because YouTube is also obviously the tech industry is run by woke people as well, so they want to demonetize anything that could be at all contentious or disagreeable with their woke values.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned at the beginning about like coronavirus. Some videos on YouTube were taken down because they appeared to spout or suggest things that were against the WHO's rules and regulations on coronavirus. So do you think that in the future, things on platforms like YouTube could then become just like the BBC and only have certain types of views on them because they're being censored by these tech barons?
Yeah, it's definitely a danger. I mean, and the danger with censorship on YouTube is that it's invisible. They just tweak the algorithm, or they can go in the back end and make videos disappear. So my friends Constantine and Francis run a show called Trigonometry. It's hugely popular on YouTube, and they're having videos just subtly you wouldn't know that they're like if you subscribe to them, you can still find the video. But it doesn't come up in recommended videos. It gets slyly just hidden away, just brushed under the carpet. So that's quite an insidious way of censoring people, just silently doing that. So I think, ironically, the tech industry might need government intervention to enforce standards of fairness and make sure that people aren't silenced for their opinions. Because I mean, things like Facebook are their whole ethos is that we're not a publisher. We're not creating this content. We're just a platform. So they can't then make editorial decisions about the content that's on their platform.
But then I suppose what you're saying about market forces, things like Netflix, they don't seem to have that much sort of what you would call right-wing comedy on them. Are they taking any of the...
I disagree. The thing is, like, Netflix makes a big fuss about putting all this woke comedy on, Mae Martin, what's that, Hannah Gadsby, all this kind of stuff. So they're like, oh, look, we've got Hannah Gadsby. Man, nobody's watching that. Everybody's watching Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, Bill Burr, Ricky Gervais, those specials. And those guys, I'd consider they're right-wing. They're essentially right-wing. They might not consider themselves to be right-wing, but certainly compared to Hannah Gadsby, they're the opposite of woke, the antithesis of woke. They're poking at all the woke stuff. Sometimes to a point where I disagree with that. I think, whoa, this guy's going too far, So I think Netflix, they're making their money off those big hitters who are totally anti-woke. And then they're also placating the woke brigade by saying, oh, look, we've got Hannah Gadsby, we've got, all these people as well.
Do you think it's safer to have something like the BBC where there is a public output that is supposed to reflect the public, or something like a market force like Netflix, where it could just decide, oh, well, we're going to go completely woke and it's up to us because we're just making money out of the woke stuff?
Nobody's going to be watching the BBC in like 10 years' time. Like, it's an anachronism. You can't, have this content that's, paid for through a sort of a tax, a levy on the public. There's going to be resistance to that tax growing when, everybody's paying for Netflix and, paying for YouTube subscriptions or whatever. Getting stuff for free on YouTube. Why would you pay the BBC if you're only watching? The only thing I use the BBC for is I think the news is great, and the World Service is just a fantastic radio station. It's just so interesting. But apart from that, I don't watch any of the stuff they put on the BBC. So I don't want to pay the license fee, and I don't actually pay the license fee. Did you know you don't have to pay the license fee? All I did was I didn't pay it, and nothing happened. Somebody came to the door. They're like, you've got to pay the license fee. I was like, nah, I don't want it. And said, look, there's my TV. It's not plugged into the aerial. I just use it for watching internet stuff. And they were like, okay, fine. And I never heard from them since.
So what would you like to see? The license fee completely scrapped?
I'd maybe like to see it whittled down, because it is quite high at the moment. Just whittled down, and everybody, all the woke people, I'd like to see them thrown out onto the street into muddy puddles, and they're crying, and they're picking up all their stuff in cardboard boxes, and the boxes get soggy and it all falls out the bottom, and then they can't get a job because they're dicks, and that would be brilliant. And then they just keep I'm happy to pay. I'll pay £10 a year for the World Service and the news. That's all I want to pay for. I don't even need the news, just the World Service. I'll pay £10 a year for the World Service.
So you mentioned earlier that there's a sort of a middle class, lovey sort of elite in the BBC. How long do you think that's been going on for? Do you think it's a new phenomenon, or is it something that's come in the last few years?
No, that's been embedded in the BBC and across media. And now in comedy as well. Comedy used to be, a working class pursuit, and now it's, been thoroughly infiltrated and turned into something that only middle class people can afford to do, because you've got to do years of unpaid work learning your craft. So I think that's a shame, and that's happening in so many things like journalism and acting. I mean, there used to be much more working class representation there. But yeah, the BBC is a bad, and the class system. People talk about racism, sexism, homophobia, things like that. Classism is by far the biggest sort of discrimination in the UK. We're quite attuned to other things, and we recognise when somebody's being homophobic or misogynist or whatever. But classism is just embedded into us, and it's insidious and nefarious, and it's always going to be there. But yeah, there's just not even I got in trouble for saying this on the Today Show on Radio 4, but when the BBC do diversity, it tends to be only skin deep. So they get, people with, different ethnic backgrounds, different genders, different sexualities, but they've all got the same, posh middle class opinions and attitudes. So there's no real sort of diversity of opinion, diversity of voice. I'd say, somebody who's grown up in a slum in Glasgow has more in common with somebody who's grown up in a slum in Chicago, or in any country, any ethnicity, than the skin color isn't the thing that connects people and makes people the same.
So do you think it's then this classism is what's stopping working class right wing views from being put out on the BBC? Because, you know, we saw in the election, the red wall was, you know, most of the votes for Boris Johnson were, let's face it, from working class voters.
Yeah.
Do you think it's this that's stopping right wing views being aired on the BBC?
And the BBC is like a big echo chamber of middle class, you know, posh. I mean, I say middle class. I'm middle class. You know what I mean? I subscribe to The Economist. I listen to, you know, Radio 4 and stuff. But I'm talking like above, way above that. We're talking Oxbridge. Like the BBC is a sort of nepotistic cabal of Oxbridge elites, and they don't realise that outside of themselves, people have like vastly different opinions, and those opinions are okay. They think, you know, their little guardian opinions are the only opinions that can be allowed, and everything else is evil. So, you know, nothing else gets a look in on the BBC.
Yeah, and what you were saying about the arts as well, and comedy in particular, that's just got an arts funding, I believe. So, is that going to affect how the comedy circuit at all? Is it going to make the comedy circuit more right wing because there's more money going into it?
No, I think that the Arts Council funding will have the opposite effect. I think it's actually it's a nail in the coffin of comedy, to be honest, because comedians shouldn't be filling in forms and bootlicking to get government grants. We should be the opposite, and we should be self-sustaining. We should be doing comedy that people want to hear, instead of like making sure. Because I don't know if you've ever seen an Arts Council form, but it's all like you've got to like talk about certain themes and issues to make your project eligible for Arts Council funding. So, you know, comedians are going to be forced to, you know, talk about certain things and issues, whatever's the flavor of the month, you know, bisexuality or, you know, whatever it is. They're going to be forced to talk about those things instead of just talking about it because they want to talk about it because it's part of their experience. So I don't know. I think comedians, I mean, we don't need Arts Council funding. I make money. Like, you know, even in coronavirus, I'm making money. I'm paying for my Audi. You just put 4 new Pirellis on my Audi. You know what I mean? Not through Arts Council funding, through going out and grafting and earning some money and buying some tires. I think that's what comedians should do. None of this, like, you know, filling in forms and, you know, it's not comedy. Can you imagine Lenny Bruce filling in a form to get government funding? That's disgusting. Just the thought of it.
All this kind of like government grants, and is that really like stripping out the heart and soul, as you would put it, of comedy?
I think it's going to skew the market. So we've got even more woke people being like, oh, look, I'm talking about these issues. Because issue comedians, you get all these comedians that are like, you know, their selling point is an issue. My selling point, being right wing and being good at comedy. Other people, they're like, oh, I'm going to do a show about anorexia or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And it's always rubbish. And so we need less of that stuff. That sort of box ticking Arts Council funded like issue comedy. Like, we just need comedy, just comedy. If it's funny, like, people will laugh. You can talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, do you think that's part of the problem? This sort of like identitarian nature everything has now. Everybody has to sort of have a label. And, you know, you're described as right wing, that's the label.
Yeah.
You know, do you think that's affecting comedy? Do you think it's dampening the creativity of comedians?
Well, I think the identitarian thing is interesting because I find it very, you know, socially divisive. My friend Nico, he says, you know, society peaked in 2004. And like now, you know, I can see it as well. We've got this sort of re-racialization of society. You know, people are identified by their, you know, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, instead of, you know, in 2004, we're all just getting on. Nobody was really bothered. And now it's you know, society's becoming like regimented again. I think that's dangerous.
So we've gone backwards.
Yeah, no, we're absolutely going backwards. Yeah. Woke people are coming from the standpoint that, like, you know, only like 2% of people have the right opinion. We can't say that, like, you know, the vast swathe of like the population, Middle England, all the working class people, they're all wrong and they're all evil. That's a terrible place to start from. Most people are nice people and they just want to get on, and they don't have any like malice in their heart. I get it. There are total, you know, misogynist, racist, homophobes out there. But there's not many of them. I haven't met one in ages. And, you know, everybody just wants to get on. But woke people are saying, no, these people are bad. They're bad. You're this identity. You're that identity. You know, why do we have to be defined by our identities? Why can't we just be like defined by our characters and personalities?
And I suppose, but for you, if there are more if there's a push for more right-wing views, you're going to have a bit more competition then. Is that going to affect you in any way, or are you quite happy to be up with more competition? Do you think that will be better for your comedy? Will it improve your comedy?
I think it'll improve my comedy, and the cream always rises to the top. I don't feel any. It's like, I don't think, Roger Federer's worried that, some kids are picking up tennis rackets. But yeah, no, I'm not worried. I think it'd be good if there's more right-wing comedians, and it would create maybe more of a sort of movement. I mean, when we say right-wing, me and Jeff, we're really quite centrist and well-meaning. We just want, responsible economic stewardship, lower taxes, smaller government, more personal freedom. And I think more and more people are wanting that, especially with the government response to coronavirus, where we're seeing our human rights stripped away. We're losing, things that have existed since like the Magna Carta, like freedom of assembly, freedom of movement, freedom of religion. And we're seeing really brutal arrests for crimes such as having a birthday party, real fascistic arrests, and also the left-wing parties are the new nasty parties. Look at Jacinta Ardern. She's like closed the borders in New Zealand. All these places that have these like left-wing governments, they're closing the borders, and everyone's like, this is a great thing to do. So what, I thought open borders and immigration was a good thing. Now all of a sudden, because like somebody might catch a cold, like it's a bad thing. Like these human rights and values and everything, the liberal values, just evaporate like that. Imagine if coronavirus was actually a serious thing that killed lots of people. It would instantly go into a totalitarian dystopia. It's mad.
You mentioned that, you and Jeff and other right-wing comedians, you just want sort of more lower taxes, less government intervention, that kind of thing. Is there a way of making that kind of thing funny? Because a lot of the right-wing comedians that I've seen just tend to go for the sort of like attacking woke and the identitarian politics, that kind of thing. Is there a way of making economic policy funny?
Yeah, there is. You should have come and seen my shows. I did a show, I Can Make You Tory, very funny show. I was talking about all kinds of stuff in there, like economic policy, nuclear power, all kinds of. And I did a show, Right Wing Comedian, again, very funny. And my show, Now Transgressive, very funny. You'll have to take my word for it. But why would I lie? Why would I lie about how funny I am?
Because I suppose it's seen as always quite a dry kind of area. It's not really that sexy. People don't seem to be that drawn to it. And
yeah, but I mean, you can find ways. Once you start writing about something, and once there's an inherent ridiculousness about something, because socialism is, at its core, it's ridiculous. It's the idea that some, government apparatchik who's totally disinterested and knows nothing about you can spend your money better than you can. Like, that idea is just so ridiculous. But everybody seems to think it's a great idea. So there's inherent things that you can unravel and find the fun in doing. I mean, doing my stuff about Thatcher closing the coal mines, you wouldn't think that'd be funny. You can make anything funny.
Thanks, Leo. That was Leo Kearse, the Scottish right-wing comedian. And if you enjoyed this video, you can like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you follow us on Twitter and Facebook by clicking the links in the description.